Merle Haggard was more than just a country music legend. He was a voice for the working class, a storyteller of hardship and redemption, and a man whose life mirrored the songs he sang. From a childhood of poverty to a troubled youth spent in and out of prison, Haggard overcame it all to become one of the most influential figures in country music history. But behind the fame, his life was filled with struggles, failed marriages, addiction, political controversy, and battles with illness. This is the tragic real-life story of Merle Haggard, a man who lived on his own terms until the very end. Merle Haggard, born on April 6, 1937, in Oildale, California, Haggard entered a world of struggle. His family, like many others during the Great Depression, had migrated to California in search of a better life, escaping the Dust Bowl conditions of Oklahoma. They settled in an old refurbished boxcar, a makeshift home that was a stark reflection of their poverty. Life was tough, but it became even harder when tragedy struck in 1946. Haggard's father, James, died suddenly of a brain hemorrhage when Merle was just 9 years old. Losing his father at such a young age left a deep void in his life, one that would take years to fill. Reflecting on that devastating loss, he later told Rolling Stone, "Something went out of my world that I was never able to replace." With his father gone, Haggard's childhood quickly unraveled. His mother, Flossie, a deeply religious woman, struggled to raise him and his siblings alone. She disapproved of music and entertainment, believing them to be distractions from a respectable life. But young Merle found solace in music, something that neither of his parents had ever encouraged. Instead of following the strict expectations of his mother, he began sneaking into music halls, drawn to the electrifying sounds of country stars, like the Maddox Brothers and Rose, as well as Lefty Frizzell. Their music spoke to him in a way nothing else did, igniting a passion that would eventually define his future. However, music wasn't the only path he was exploring. Struggling with grief, anger, and a growing sense of rebellion, Merle began getting into trouble from an early age. With no father to guide him and a strained relationship with his mother, he started acting out. By the time he was 11 years old, his behavior had become so disruptive that his mother, overwhelmed and at her wit's end, turned him over to the authorities, calling him incorrigible. It was a decision made out of desperation, but it would set him on a dangerous path. By his teenage years, Haggard was in and out of juvenile detention centers, always one step ahead of the law. He stole cars, hopped trains, and committed petty crimes to get by. But perhaps the most shocking part of his delinquent years was his knack for escaping custody. He later claimed to have broken out of jail an astonishing 17 times. His crimes escalated over time, and what started as minor offenses eventually led to serious legal trouble. In 1957, his reckless lifestyle finally caught up with him. At just 20 years old, Haggard was arrested for attempting to rob a roadhouse while drunk. This time, there was no escape. He was sentenced to San Quentin State Prison, one of the most notorious prisons in the country. He entered prison unsure of how long he would be behind bars, but ultimately served 3 years. San Quentin would prove to be a turning point in Haggard's life. The harsh reality of prison life forced him to reevaluate the road he was on. At one point, a fellow inmate attempted an escape, killing a highway patrolman in the process. That inmate was later sentenced to death and executed, a grim reminder of what could have easily been Haggard's own fate had he continued down the same path. The experience shook him to his core, making him realize that he didn't want to end up like so many of the men he was incarcerated with. But perhaps the most pivotal moment of his time in San Quentin came on New Year's Day in 1958 when Johnny Cash performed at the prison. At the time, Haggard wasn't particularly fond of Cash's music, calling it corny. But witnessing the legendary performer command the attention of hardened criminals with his raw and rebellious presence changed everything for him. The way Cash connected with the inmates and spoke to their struggles resonated deeply with Haggard. That performance became a defining moment in his life, fueling his desire to turn things around. After his release in 1960, Haggard knew he had to make a change. He had always had a talent for music, but now he saw it as his only way forward. He was determined to leave his criminal past behind and focus on something that could give his life meaning. This decision marked the beginning of an incredible journey, one that would take him from the depths of a prison cell to the pinnacle of country music stardom. In his 2011 autobiography, My House of Memories, Merle Haggard reflected on one of the most defining moments of his life, a choice that likely saved him from a tragic fate. While serving time in San Quentin, a fellow inmate attempted to persuade him to escape. This wasn't the first time Haggard had been tempted by the idea, as he had already made previous attempts to break free. But something about this particular offer gave him pause. Whether it was instinct or an unexplainable gut feeling, he turned it down. That decision proved to be life-changing. The inmate who attempted the escape didn't just run, he killed a highway patrolman in the process. His actions led to swift consequences. He was caught, sentenced to death, and later executed. The reality of what could have been his own fate left Haggard shaken to his core. That near miss forced him to take a hard look at the path he was on, and he made a vow to himself he had to turn his life around. However, the moment that truly set him on a different course came through music. While still serving his sentence, Haggard attended a live performance at San Quentin by none other than Johnny Cash. The concert took place on New Year's Day 1959, and the energy in the prison was electric. The inmates, hardened by their circumstances, responded to Cash in a way that surprised Haggard. They weren't just watching a performance, they were feeling it. The rawness of Cash's music, his outlaw persona, and the way he commanded the stage resonated deeply with them. What stood out to Haggard the most, however, wasn't just the music itself, it was Cash's ability to connect with the prisoners. Unlike the outside world, which largely viewed them as lost causes, Johnny Cash saw them as human beings. He understood them, spoke their language, and treated them with a level of respect they rarely received. That authenticity left a lasting mark on Haggard. Before that night, Haggard had dismissed Cash's music entirely. He later admitted, "I didn't care for his music, I thought it was corny." But watching Johnny Cash hold a room full of convicted felons in the palm of his hand, earning their admiration and respect, changed everything. It made Haggard realize that music had a power he had never fully appreciated before. That moment ignited something in him. He wanted to do what Cash did. He wanted to tell stories through music, to connect with people the way Cash had connected with those prisoners. As fate would have it, the two men would eventually become close friends. Their bond, forged through shared experiences and a deep love for country music, lasted a lifetime. Many years later, when Johnny Cash lay in a hospital ICU, nearing the end of his life, Haggard made a final visit. Always one for humor, he walked into the room wearing a doctor's coat. When Cash saw him, he weakly asked, "What are you doing here?" Without missing a beat, Haggard responded with words that captured the depth of their friendship. "I'm here because I love you." It was a simple, heartfelt moment between two men whose lives had intertwined in ways neither of them could have imagined all those years ago in San Quentin. After his release on parole in 1960, Merle Haggard made a pivotal decision. He would finally dedicate himself to music. Up until then, his life had been a string of poor choices, run-ins with the law, and unfulfilled potential. Now free, he split his time between working for his brother Lowell and seeking out any opportunity to perform. On Saturdays, he immersed himself in the local music scene, playing small gigs and figuring out where he fit into the industry. Though he had raw talent, he lacked direction. But fate had a way of intervening when he least expected it. One day, Jack Collier, a stranger with an intriguing offer, showed up at Haggard's house. He explained that his band had just lost its frontman, and they were searching for a replacement. Without hesitation, Haggard jumped at the chance. The group played together 4 nights a week, giving him his first taste of steady work as a musician. It wasn't glamorous, but it was exactly what he needed to sharpen his skills and build his confidence on stage. Looking back, Haggard would later write in his autobiography, "That little gig was the beginning, and it went all the way from that to where I am today." For the next few years, Haggard played anywhere that would have him, from dive bars to dance halls, constantly refining his sound. He studied the greats of country music, drawing inspiration from Hank Williams and Lefty Frizzell, the latter of whom became a major influence on his vocal style. Haggard also started writing his own songs, putting his experiences into lyrics that resonated with working-class audiences. His dedication and perseverance eventually led him to a deal with Capitol Records in the early 1960s. His breakthrough came in January 1964 with Sing a Sad Song, which reached number 1, 19 on the Billboard country charts. While the song didn't turn him into a household name overnight, it proved that he had the potential to compete in the industry. More importantly, it gave him a much-needed confidence boost. This was proof that he could make it in country music. From that moment on, he was determined to push even further. While his professional life was beginning to take off, his personal life was much more turbulent. Over the years, Haggard would marry 5 times, each relationship marked by its own struggles. His first marriage to Leona Hobbs lasted 8 years and resulted in 4 children. But despite their growing family, the relationship was deeply troubled. The couple was known for their fiery arguments, which often escalated into physical altercations. One report even claimed that Leona beat Haggard in public, and on another occasion, she allegedly jumped out of a moving car to escape one of their heated fights. The marriage eventually fell apart, marking the first of many tumultuous relationships in Haggard's life. Haggard later admitted that one of the biggest strains on his marriage to Leona Hobbs stemmed from what had happened while he was incarcerated at San Quentin. During his time in prison, Leona had become pregnant with another man's child. Their relationship, already volatile, only worsened after his release. The breaking point came when she openly mocked him in front of her new lover. Consumed by rage, Haggard lost control and attacked her, beginning to strangle her in a moment of blind fury. He recalled thinking, "Well, I know where I'll be going. I'll be going to death row, San Quentin." But before it was too late, he snapped back to reality, realizing the irreversible path he was heading down. Their marriage was beyond repair, and in 1964, they finalized their divorce. Haggard would go on to marry 4 more times. Among his wives, Bonnie Owens, his second, was the one who left the deepest mark on his music. A talented singer herself, Bonnie played a crucial role in shaping his career, helping him write and refine some of his most iconic songs. Even after their divorce in 1978, following 13 years of marriage, she remained by his side, continuing to tour as his backup singer. Their professional and personal bond endured until Bonnie's passing in 2006. In 1993, Haggard found lasting love with his 5th and final wife, Teresa Ann Lane. Their marriage stood the test of time, lasting until Haggard's death in 2016. His passing was devastating for Teresa, who later said, "I'm just now picking myself up out of the dirt, and I'm barely walking, 'cause I lost my everything. He was my world." Throughout his career, Haggard used his music to reflect on the struggles he had endured, including his time behind bars and the pain of losing his father. Songs like Mama Tried, Sing Me Back Home, and Branded Man told the stories of hardship, redemption, and regret. Initially, he hesitated to discuss his past, fearing that his criminal record might damage his career. However, after encouragement from Johnny Cash, he decided to be open about his history. Appearing on the Johnny Cash Show, he revealed the truth, that he had, in fact, served time in prison. Instead of harming his reputation, the admission made him even more relatable to fans, reinforcing the authenticity of his music. Later in life, Haggard shared a story about Cash that summed up his public image perfectly. He recalled that Johnny once told him, "Hag, you're the guy people think I am." It was a testament to Haggard's raw honesty and the lived experiences that gave his songs their power, making him one of country music's most authentic voices. Before outlaw country even had a name, Merle Haggard was already defining it. Unlike many artists who played it safe, he defied record label expectations and industry trends by releasing politically charged and controversial songs in the late 1960s and early 1970s. One of his biggest hits, Okie from Muskogee, took direct aim at the counterculture movement, rejecting the ideals of hippies and the anti-war protests of the time. The song resonated deeply with the so-called silent majority, conservative Americans who supported President Nixon and the Vietnam War. Following its success, Haggard doubled down with an even more pointed anthem, The Fight Inside of Me, which condemned anti-war activists and suggested that criticizing the country was unpatriotic. These songs became rallying cries for conservatives, reinforcing his image as a blue-collar voice for traditional American values. However, while his anthems were celebrated by one side of the political spectrum, they were equally criticized by the other. Over time, even Haggard became conflicted about how his music was interpreted. He admitted that Okie from Muskogee wasn't necessarily a reflection of his personal views, but rather a way of capturing the mindset of certain Americans at the time. Ironically, despite the song's famous stance against marijuana, Haggard himself was a regular user. Reflecting on the song's impact, he once said, "Okie from Muskogee is a hit for other reasons, which, a lot of them, I'm not sure of." Like Johnny Cash, Haggard felt a deep connection to those behind bars. He never forgot the way Cash's concert at San Quentin had changed his life, and he wanted to give back in the same way. Over the years, he played multiple free concerts at prisons, including San Quentin, where he had once been an inmate. He also performed for prisoners at Fort Leavenworth, Huntsville, and even several women's correctional facilities. Speaking with Rolling Stone, Haggard described how prison crowds were unlike any other audience. The key to a great show, he explained, was letting the inmates take the lead. You kind of let them direct you. They sometimes are adamant about an area of your career that you might not even be aware of. They want something that you might have forgot about. They're in charge of their show, and they know it, and I let them know it. They just kind of help me along. During the 1980s, Merle Haggard faced one of the most challenging periods of his life as he battled drug addiction. In his memoir, My House of Memories, he wrote openly about this dark chapter, choosing to be transparent not just for his fans, but more importantly, for his children. He wanted them to understand both his mistakes and the dangers of substance abuse. I said early in this book that I reluctantly confess these things about myself, knowing my children will read them. I believe my kids know I wouldn't lie to them, he explained, underscoring his commitment to honesty, no matter how painful the truth. Decades later, Haggard's past unexpectedly resurfaced in a controversy that caught country music fans by surprise. In 2015, singer Luke Bryan made an offhand comment during an interview that referenced Haggard's history with drugs. I think that people who want Merle, Willie, and Waylon just need to buy Merle, Willie, and Waylon. I'm not an outlaw country singer. I don't do cocaine and run around, so I'm not going to sing outlaw country. His remarks didn't sit well with many fans, who saw them as dismissive and disrespectful. Social media backlash quickly followed, forcing Brian to reach out to Haggard's son, Ben, to personally apologize for dragging his father's name into the conversation. Although Haggard struggled with addiction during the 1980s, he later revealed that the real turning point in his life came not from drugs, but from a devastating financial collapse. In 1992, he filed for bankruptcy, a moment that forced him to take a hard look at the way he had been handling his career and personal life. What made it even more painful was the timing. That same day, his fifth wife, Teresa, gave birth to their son, Bignon. The stark contrast between welcoming new life and confronting financial ruin was a wake-up call, pushing Haggard to rebuild both his finances and his future. In his final years, Merle Haggard battled a series of health issues that made it increasingly difficult for him to continue doing what he loved most, performing. Despite his struggles, he remained committed to his music, playing whenever he could and refusing to slow down. Even after a severe bout of pneumonia in early 2016, he remained optimistic. Speaking to Rolling Stone, he expressed gratitude for surviving the illness and was determined to get back on the road. At 78 years old, he was already preparing for a tour just days after being discharged from the hospital. Looking back, he admitted that he had ignored the warning signs, frequent coughing fits that he assumed were just part of getting older, but he had always believed that performing was its own form of therapy. I always felt better after I'd work because of the exercise that it gave to my lungs. When I play, I feel better when I come off. Eventually, the illness caught up with him. Before one of his shows, he suddenly felt as though he was suffocating and was rushed to the hospital. Doctors diagnosed him with severe pneumonia, describing the infection as the size of a grapefruit on each side of his lungs. The experience was terrifying, but in true Haggard fashion, he fought his way through it. Just weeks later, he was back on his feet, ready to return to the stage. Haggard was never a simple man, and he was never just a simple country star. He once admitted, "It never has been fun being Merle Haggard. I've had lots of peaks and valleys." His life was a story of contradictions, an ex-convict who became a legend, a man who sang patriotic anthems while questioning his government, an outlaw with deep regrets. His past was filled with struggles, from theft and incarceration to substance abuse and failed marriages. His political views were just as complex. He once said, "I'm deeply disturbed with our country and deeply in love with it." But if there was one thing Haggard never did, it was hide from his own truth. He poured all of his hardships, doubts, and experiences into his music, crafting deceptively simple songs that spoke to the universal struggles of everyday people. His raw honesty resonated with millions, making him one of the most authentic voices in country music history. On April 6, 2016, his 79th birthday, Merle Haggard passed away. Fans and fellow musicians around the world mourned his loss, with tributes pouring in from legends like Dolly Parton, Willie Nelson, and Clint Eastwood. Ringo Starr, who had long admired Haggard, tweeted, "God bless Merle Haggard. Peace and love to all his family. Merle was a hero of mine. Peace and love." Merle Haggard's legacy is one of resilience, redemption, and raw honesty. His music captured the highs and lows of life, speaking to people who had lived through struggles just like his. Though his life was marked by controversy, heartbreak, and personal battles, his songs remain timeless, continuing to inspire new generations of country music fans. In the end, Haggard was a man who never shied away from his past, and He poured every bit of it into his music. What are your thoughts on Merle Haggard's life and career? Let us know in the comments, and if you love deep dives into the lives of music legends, don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out more stories of the icons who shaped country music.